The car hummed softly under Emily Carter's grip, the dashboard glowing faintly against the dusk. Her body ached, still fragile from thyroid surgery. But her heart burned with purpose. 10 hours on the road, pushing past exhaustion, all for this moment. Today was her mother's 55th birthday, and Emily's early discharge from the hospital felt like fate smiling down. A gift box, wrapped in silver ribbon, sat on the passenger seat next to her prescription bottle. She pictured her mother's face lighting up at the sight of her. Healthy and home. If I show up strong, Mom will be relieved, she told herself, the thought fueling her through the dull pain radiating in her chest. The sky had darkened by the time Emily pulled into the driveway of her mother's house in a quiet suburban neighborhood outside Denver, Colorado. The porch light cast a warm glow, familiar yet heavy with memories. She hadn't lived here in years, but her hand trembled as she slid the key into the lock. This place still held a piece of her heart, tethered by years of unspoken expectations. Without knocking, she eased the door open, ready to call out to her mother. But then, voices from the living room stopped her cold. Dad left that house to her. I want it, her mother, Diane, said, her tone sharp and calculating. I hope she doesn't get discharged. Emily froze behind the door, her breath catching in her throat. She thought she'd misheard, but her brother, Jake, spoke next, shattering any doubt. She said it's just a small tumor, probably to keep us from worrying. But honestly, if something happened to her, it'd make things easier, less stress, especially with the loan. Each word sliced through her like glass. Her pulse thundered, a ringing in her ears drowning out the rest of their conversation. She caught her mother's voice again, laced with venom. She's trying to keep everything for herself. Grandpa's house, the trust fund, all while playing the poor victim. Emily's mind reeled. Since her parents' divorce 12 years ago, their family had been a fractured thing, held together by Diane's part-time jobs and constant complaints about money. Diane had always placed impossible expectations on Emily, demanding perfection. You're the responsible one, she'd say, but mistakes were never forgiven. Jake, meanwhile, was excused for everything, his laziness, his failures. He'd smirk at Emily's efforts, tossing out, "You're too intense, sis." Diane believed anything she wanted, like the house and trust fund Emily's grandfather left her, was rightfully hers. As if entitlement were a birthright. Emily quietly shut the door, her breath shaky in the chilly Colorado air. The cold sank into her bones as she pulled the gift box from her bag and set it by the entrance. She slipped the key back into her pocket and returned to her car without a sound. Sitting in the dark, she realized something stark and freeing. She never had to come back here again. The betrayal from her mother and brother tore at her, but it also ignited a resolve she hadn't known she possessed. Her fingers found her phone. Scrolling to her cousin, Sarah Mitchell, she hit call. Hey, Sarah, sorry it's late. You free? Sarah's voice came through, steady and unsurprised. No worries, Emily. What's going on? Things got messy at Mom's. I'll explain later. Can I come over? Emily's voice wavered, but she held it together. Of course. Doors unlocked. Take your time, Sarah said, her warmth cutting through the night. Sarah, 32 and 7 years older than Emily, had always been like a big sister. She'd sensed the tension between Emily and Diane long ago, having navigated her own family struggles. When Emily confessed her confusion about dealing with her mother, Sarah never judged, she listened. To Emily, Sarah was more family than Diane or Jake ever had been. As Emily drove to Sarah's house in Boulder, exhaustion stung her eyes. Her body, fresh from the hospital, screamed for rest. But going back to her mother's was no longer an option. Just before midnight, Sarah stood at her door in flannel pajamas, pulling Emily into a hug the moment she saw her. You've been through hell, Sarah said softly, and those words broke the dam. Emily buried her face in Sarah's shoulder, silent sobs shaking her frame as everything she'd held back poured out. It's okay. You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you, Sarah whispered, guiding Emily into the living room. The space was a sanctuary, softly lit, with travel photos and vibrant paintings on the walls, wrapping Emily in comfort. She pulled her medication and medical file from her bag, setting them beside the key to her grandfather's house. Looking at them, she said, her voice firm, "I'm not going back there. Ever." Sarah nodded. No questions asked. With her, Emily didn't need to explain or pretend. For the first time in hours, a flicker of peace settled in her chest. Fragile but real, the morning sun filtered through the blinds of Sarah's cozy Boulder home, casting soft stripes across the hardwood floor. Emily Carter sat at the kitchen table, a steaming mug of coffee in her hands. But her mind was far from calm. The sting of her mother's betrayal lingered like a bruise. But last night's tears had hardened into something else, resolve. Across from her, Sarah, her cousin and lifeline, scrolled through her phone, her expression thoughtful. "You need to protect yourself, Em," Sarah said, setting the phone down. "Not just emotionally, but legally. That house, the trust fund, they're yours. You can't let them take that too." Emily nodded, her jaw tight. The house in Colorado Springs, left to her by her grandfather, was more than brick and mortar. It was a symbol of her independence, a legacy meant for her future. The trust fund, set up to secure her dreams, was sacred. Yet her mother, Diane, and brother, Jake, had spoken of them as if they were theirs to claim. The memory of their words, "I hope she doesn't get discharged," burned in her chest. "I don't even know where to start," Emily admitted, her voice low. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes steady. "I know someone, a lawyer. Her name's Rachel Bennett. She's sharp, calm, and doesn't mess around. She helped me with some family stuff a while back. I'll call her today." Emily exhaled, a flicker of hope cutting through her doubt. For the first time since that awful night, she felt like she wasn't alone in this fight. 2 days later, Emily sat in Rachel Bennett's sleek Denver office. A stack of documents spread across the polished desk. Rachel, a poised woman in her late 40s with a voice that carried quiet authority, flipped through the trust agreement and property title, her brow furrowed as she paused on a page. "This is concerning," she said, tapping a clause. "There's a record of someone attempting to change the trustee when you were 20. It wasn't approved, but someone tried to gain access. And here," she slid a financial log toward Emily, "3 unauthorized withdrawals from the trust. 5,000 when you were 20, 8,000 at 23, and 10,000 at 26. Listed as household expenses and emergency support. No repayment history, no consent." Emily's stomach churned. That was Diane, she whispered, the truth settling like lead. Her mother had been siphoning her inheritance for years, all while preaching family loyalty. Rachel met her gaze, unflinching. "This is misuse, Emily. You have grounds for legal action, civil and potentially criminal. We can restructure the trust to lock it down, ensuring only you control it. But the withdrawals? That's your call. You could press charges." Emily's fingers tightened around the edge of her chair. The idea of suing her own mother felt like stepping off a cliff. But the alternative, letting Diane's betrayal go unpunished, was worse. "I'm not doing this out of hate," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "I just want to protect what's mine. I want boundaries." Rachel nodded, a faint smile of respect crossing her face. "Then let's get to work." Weeks later, Emily's resolve was tested. She was at Sarah's, folding laundry in the living room, when the doorbell rang. Her heart sank as she opened the door to find Diane and Jake standing there, their faces a mask of forced warmth. "Emily, sweetheart," Diane said, her smile too bright. "We were worried sick. You just left that gift and vanished." Jake, slouched with his hands in his pockets, added, "You look okay, I guess. Still recovering, though, right?" Emily's pulse raced, but she held her ground. They didn't know she'd overheard them that night, plotting to take her inheritance. Their fake concern was almost laughable, but it fueled her anger. "Let's cut the act," she said, her voice cold. "I heard you, Mom. You and Jake, talking about how you hoped I wouldn't get discharged. How you wanted Grandpa's house. The trust fund. I know everything." Diane's face froze, her eyes darting to Jake, who shifted uncomfortably. "That was a misunderstanding," Diane stammered. "We were stressed. Talking nonsense. You know how tough things have been." Jake jumped in, his tone defensive. Yeah, what's with you digging into stuff? You're blowing this out of proportion. Emily pulled an envelope from her bag. The one Rachel had prepared. This is the trust fund investigation. It shows the money you took without my permission. Years of it. I'm handling this legally. Diane's composure cracked, her voice rising. You're really going to sue your own mother? We're family, Emily. Jake scoffed, muttering, this is on Mom, not me. The room felt suffocating, but Emily stood tall. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't wish you dead for a house. Stay out of my life and my property. Diane opened her mouth, then closed it, her face pale. Jake stormed out, and Diane followed, casting a final, wounded glance. As the door shut, Emily exhaled, a weight lifting from her shoulders. She wasn't running anymore. The courtroom in Denver was stark, its silence heavy as Emily took the witness stand. Across the room, Diane sat, her hair meticulously styled, her makeup flawless, a desperate attempt to maintain her image. Jake was absent, dodging responsibility as always. Rachel presented the evidence with surgical precision, signed documents, financial logs, and Emily's grandfather's will, all confirming Emily as the sole heir. The unauthorized withdrawals were laid bare, $23 stolen over 6 years. Disguised as family needs. Diane's lawyer argued financial desperation, claiming no malicious intent, but Emily's testimony cut through the excuses. I wanted to believe I was loved, she said, her voice clear, eyes fixed on the jury. That's why I ignored the red flags. But the night I came home from the hospital, I heard my mother and brother say they hoped I wouldn't survive, so they could take my inheritance. My illness was just a tool for them. A juror's frown deepened, glancing at Diane, who fidgeted in her seat. The verdict came swiftly. The judge's voice was measured. The defendant's actions constitute a breach of contract and fraud. The court orders civil repayment, fines, and partial criminal penalties. Diane's soft gasp echoed in the quiet room. Emily felt no triumph, only relief. Rachel leaned over, whispering, this is your boundary, Emily. You've done it. Outside, Diane chased after her on the courthouse steps. Her makeup smudged, her voice raw. How could you do this to me? We're family. Emily turned, unflinching. Family doesn't exploit my illness or steal my future. You made your choices. Now face them. She walked away, Sarah waiting in the distance, her wave a beacon of support. Months later, Emily stood in her new studio apartment in Fort Collins, a modest space with a potted plant thriving by the window. She'd started freelance marketing work, 3 days a week, the rhythm grounding her. Sarah visited one weekend, chopping vegetables for lunch as Emily tossed a salad. Heard about your mom and Jake, Sarah said cautiously. They're struggling. Sold the car, moved to a cheap place. Diane's in therapy now, saying she's rethinking things. Emily paused, absorbing the news. She didn't hate them, but she couldn't trust them either. I hope she's serious, she said simply, but I'm done saving them at my expense. Sarah smiled, pouring her a glass of water. You've changed, Em. The old you would have broken down hearing this. Emily laughed softly, the sound lighter than she'd expected. Yeah, I'm learning to live for me. Stepping onto her balcony, she closed her eyes, the mountain air cool against her skin. The scars of betrayal hadn't vanished, but they were fading, day by day, with Sarah's support and her own strength. Emily knew she was building a life that was hers alone, one no one could take away.